So today we are continuing our series all about the chakras. And today we're talking about the third eye, the sixth chakra. And this is a really, really interesting chakra because it has so many applications. You know, we can use the third chakra, the third eye to help find inspired communication. We use the third eye to help manifest inspiration. We use the third eye to see people for who they truly are and to see situations for what's really going on. We hear guidance here. We navigate the world through here. So it's exceptionally important. And so I'm really happy we're chatting about it today. You know, it's interesting, when I was pondering our talk, I was looking at the definition of the word intuition, because we normally associate intuition with the third eye or the sixth chakra. And if you look at the definition of intuition, it means to perceive directly without reasoning. To perceive directly without reasoning. And I was listening to that thinking, that's weird. I mean, it's true, but it was missing something for me. So I went further back into the etymology of the word intuition. And it actually used to mean spiritual insight or immediate spiritual communication. That's what intuition originally meant. Spiritual insight. It reminds me of the story of Ramanujan. Ramanujan was this amazing Indian mathematician, and back in the time of the First World War, and he would sit in prayer and mathematical equations would come to him and he would just write them out, and he had no mathematical training or anything. There's a beautiful movie about him called The Man Who Knew Infinity. It's a book too, but the movie's really lovely. I first heard about him in the movie Good Will Hunting. They talk about this genius boy in India who was this amazing mathematician. But one of his greatest struggles was everything came to him here as spiritual inspiration. He was getting it firsthand. And the mathematicians in Cambridge, he eventually went to England to speak to other mathematicians, but they couldn't embrace the idea of spiritual insight. This was not possible. You can't have spiritual insight. You can't develop mathematical concepts without reasoning. We have to be able to prove them. So the entire time he was in Cambridge, they just kind of, honestly, in my opinion, wasted his time trying to prove spiritual insight through reasoning, instead of expanding on this exceptional insight. The ego of man, I don't mean men, I mean the ego of man in general, us. The ego that we've developed says, no, if I can't understand it, it's not real, it's not accurate, it's not correct. And so what happened is, sure, lots of people studied. He's got like these 2 books of all of Ramanujan's notes and equations. And people have been trying to play with them and sort them out, you know. But for the most part, nobody, at least in the way the story was told, embraced it as spiritual insight and grew from there. You know, so obsessed with reasoning. You can't pull apart spiritual insight. You can't do that. It's like trying to take infinity and writing, fitting it in a jar or something. It's not possible. And you're going to ruin it. You're going to make it smaller. You're going to make it simpler than it really is. So it's really interesting, on the one hand, to allow intuition to be divine, to allow it to be our connection to infinity. And at the same time, to really make it part of our life. Like, we don't want to mystify it so much that it's only something that happens when we're meditating, or it only happens with people who are great yogis and great whatever, right? It's for every single one of us to honor that we all have this guidance. We all have this connection to infinity, to the quantum field, to the divine, to God. We all have this. And we don't have to question it so much. Right? We can be, like Ramanujan was so frustrated. Like, he just couldn't understand. He was getting this from divine guidance. What possible authority was higher than that? What were these theoretically the smartest people at Cambridge? Why were they tearing this apart? Like, he could not fathom these two worlds. He just couldn't fathom it. So let's talk about, for a moment, chakras. Because we talk about chakras a lot in the spiritual community. We can talk about chakras in terms of how they govern different bodily functions, emotions, mental ideas, all these kind of things. We can see how they work all together. But I want to talk about how the chakras help us navigate the world. So I want you to imagine that here you are, this energy being. Just imagine you're just like this, almost like, in our physical world, we would call this a single-celled amoeba or something, right? We're just this entity, this spiritual entity. And we decide, you want to go play on Earth for a while? Let's go play in like gravity and become a carbon-based life form, a carbon-based life form. Wouldn't that be fun? Oh, how will we do it? Well, what if we come down and we take this singular being that we are, and we're going to need to be able to do stuff there. Okay, well, so we need to actually have physical body, and we need to be, on the earth. Okay, let's split out this energy that we are and allow that to be the first chakra, right? This is my physical being. This is my connection to the earth. This is the way that I'm like a tree. This is the way I'm like the water, right? This is me manifest on the earth. Oh, good. Yeah, let's have a first chakra. That'll be good. And then, there's going to be a whole pile of us, so we need to know how to interact with each other, right? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, let's have a second chakra, and that will govern how I interact with each other. And it's like, well, are we different? Yeah, we're all different. So we're going to have a third chakra that defines us as something interesting and different so that we can have some kind of juicy experience, right? That'd be cool. Oh, yes, that'll be fun. Then, how are we going to connect with each other? Like, how do we, feel each other? And like, oh, well, let's have a heart center. And through love and connection, we'll call it love. But this is how we connect and continue to empathically communicate, through the heart center. Oh, excellent idea. Okay. And what about, do we still stay connected to who we are now though? Oh yeah, that's like the crown chakra. We'll always maintain this connection and remember who we are. It's like, but what if I can't hear it? Oh, that's okay. We've got a third eye. We're going to have this sixth chakra, and that's going to be like our satellite to always be able to hear guidance. It's like, but what if I hear something here and I need to, explain it to you or tell you, oh, don't worry, we have this chakra here, and this is where I'll share with you whatever I know. So we have these wonderful chakras so that as an energy being, we can have a physical experience here. And each chakra has a role to play. And together, they're all one, right? They're all the same. They all just have different jobs. So now let's imagine this third chakra, I keep calling it third chakra. Third eye, our sixth chakra. What's it for? Really? Well, the number one thing it's for is for inspiration, like for the information to come down from our true self, from our infinite self, the quantum field, that which we are constantly going in and out of, renewing and coming back in, right? We need to kind of have a sense of what's going on there. So we listen, right? How do we listen? Maybe we close our eyes because these eyes are so focused in the first chakra, right? What's going on? Is there a lion that's gonna, come after me? Like, I've gotta keep my wits about me. It's like, okay, hold on. I think I'm safe. I'm gonna close my eyes for a minute and I'm gonna listen. Hold on. Right? And then we are able to actually listen. We're allowed to introspect. We're allowed to look within and hear guidance. So then the interesting thing about that is this is actually how we navigate this interesting world as a carbon-based life form. We don't navigate the world through our first chakra. The first chakra simply keeps us safe. It just drives us, something's chasing us and we run away, right? And that's all it does, or it makes us run towards something that's sexy or something. But it's not navigation, it's just reaction. Our second chakra, well, that's just how we interact with people. That's not guidance. That's just masculine, feminine dynamics, not gender, just duality, right? Third chakra, that's not about making decisions. Heart chakra, that's not about making decisions. This is our only navigation center. It's the only thing that we were given to actually help us decide, do I turn right or do I turn left? Do I choose to do that or don't I? So why? Why is this so important? Because remember, we're this beautiful energy being that decided to come down to earth and create this experience. There's some purpose, right? There's some seventh chakra reason we're here. So we've always got to be listening. And that's why it's unique for every one of us. Our intuition isn't a combination. It's just for me. This is how I'm going to listen. This is how I'm going to navigate and figure out what the next step in my life is. So to value this, to value that ability to listen within and perpetually be connected to our actual nature. This is a huge deal. This changes everything. This changes our entire experience of living. So for example, let's say you have someone in your life. Maybe it's an intimate other, a partner. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a child. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's a colleague. In our world, we kind of cut off this upper area. The secular world doesn't really want us to think too much about our divine being, our infinite power potential. This is not a popular opinion amongst those who might want to control us. So it's definitely been poo-pooed. We might even call it, being a weird spiritual person or something like that. So we don't really listen up here, and we get very focused down here in the physical world, right? In those interactions with each other and survival on the earth and who am I? We get very focused down here. We call this the lower triangle, not because it's lower or bad. It's how we connect on the earth, right? Who am I in the third chakra? How do I relate to each other in the second? And how do I fit on the earth, whether it's in nature or society? This lower triangle. We might spend 99.9% of our energy focusing on issues there, right? So we have these eyes, these two eyes. And when we look at people, we see them, But then we have all these thoughts and emotions and everything from these lower triangles, right? This lower triangle, fear and worry and control issues and all these kind of things. They all they rise up. And then these eyes get clouded by all of this lower triangle struggle, right? So instead, you imagine you look at the person through your two eyes. But now imagine looking at them through this eye. Like open this eye. And as we're looking at this other person, maybe you're in the middle of an argument. Maybe things are bad. Maybe something really, really hard is going on. And through your eyes, all you see is this person that you're either so frustrated with or so angry with or so hurt by or whatever it is. And that's all you can see. But then if you open this eye, what do you really see? What do you see when you blend your experience here with a greater experience? Maybe you see someone who's scared. Maybe you see someone who doesn't feel heard. Maybe you see something that you didn't see before. You know, sometimes we can see the angry person through these eyes, and through this eye, we see the scared person. It's an amazing thing to always, no matter what's going on, to just stop and look here. Imagine a situation. It could be anything. It could be a situation at work, personally, in the world, relationships, everything. In my eyes, I can observe what's going on. I can mentally maybe calculate things. But if I look at the situation here, other information comes in. And that other information doesn't necessarily have words. And that's where it becomes difficult in this land, right? This is where Ramanujan, and we are all a Ramanujan, we get into trouble. You know, because suddenly we might see a situation and we have all the facts, but if we listen here, something softens it. A greater understanding arises. A wisdom is applied. And suddenly, maybe we pop out of the polarity. Maybe one person isn't right and the other person is wrong. Maybe everybody's just hurting. You know, maybe it gives you the realization, because in no way am I saying, so and therefore you should stay in an abusive situation. Because sometimes when we see here, we're finally able to recognize the situation we're actually in. And we're able to go, aha, this is a pattern that's never going to change. This other person has to play out this story. I don't really want to be the other player in this story. Oh. Right? We're no longer seeing through the eyes of a hurt woman. I'm seeing it through the eyes of my witness mind, of my much wiser self that says, now we can choose whether we continue to play or not. It's a whole other world, you know. I remember even like when my kids were little, and my son, when he was little, he was bullied at school, like just mercilessly. And he was always tall and lanky and kind of awkward and super shy and just didn't play hockey like the other kids, and just had a hard time. And he would come home and you could tell something wasn't right. I'd say, is everything okay? Everything's fine. You know, and I'd kind of just look at him and I wouldn't know what to do. And so I would always ask, like, luckily, you know, when I went through all the breast lumps and the healing crisis and I met my teacher, my kids were only 2 and 4. So, and through that journey, I had to figure out how to listen. So I was kind of thankful that by the time my kids were in school, I was sort of used to that. And I would look at my son and kind of wait. Because intuition's a funny thing. Like, how do you access it? I would just sort of stare at him. And I was obviously asking the universe, what can I do? I don't need to know what the details are, but I do need to know what can I do. And then I'd have some vision. And the vision might be bake cookies. Or I might have a vision of us going for a bike ride. And not with any big intention, not to get the answers out of him, just to go for a bike ride. Like to almost, there's something really interesting about following this guidance, because we no longer get to be smart about it. Because we don't know where the guidance comes from. We don't know why we're doing it, and we don't know how it all fits together. But it's almost like you trust that I may not know how it all fits in the big picture, but I'll do my part. Whatever that is, I'm listening. So there's a great surrender to it, which is, it's funny, in the beginning it feels like you're giving up something, and then once you start playing with it, it's so much easier. You just sort of, it's so awesome. In my book, Tantric Intimacy, I talk about inspired communication, and it was a lot around my kids and how I used to take them to the couch when they were upset about something. And it was the same thing. I would sit with them and they'd be upset and they wouldn't be able to, articulate it, or they wouldn't want to articulate it, or I'm a bit of a mother bear too. And so if things were a muck at school, they're like, Mom, I don't want you to go into the school. And it's like, they just, okay. And so they sometimes didn't want to tell me stuff either. And I would just sit there and I would ask for guidance. And I would wait. And then words would come. And maybe I'd just start telling a weird story, shocker. Or I would just ask a question. A question would come into my mind and then they would answer it, and then things would happen. And this use of this for inspired communication is, to me, one of our most valuable, really practical assets. When I talk about this lower triangle, right, that connects us to the earth, that is our incarnation here on the planet, there's this upper triangle of our connection to the divine. We listen and we share. And when we think about communication, commune, to come together, and we ask ourselves, why do we communicate? Why do we speak? I mean, sometimes we speak to hurt people, to push them away, to make ourselves feel powerful, to manipulate, right? We definitely do that. But what if we used our voice to draw together, to connect us? And this is what, to me, inspired communication is all about. Where, and this could be at work, you could be in the middle of a board meeting and, things aren't really going well, or people are stuck, and you kind of just sit there quietly and you listen and you ask. Like, we're allowed to ask for help, and then we ask for help and words come and we speak them and things work out. Or we're in the middle of an argument. We could be in the middle of the most emotionally heavy argument. And if we stop for a moment and remember to breathe and ask for a bridge between you and the other person, it will come. If we ask for the meanest thing we can possibly say to them, that also will come. It's not always just, intuition doesn't just happen for, that's why people can be so hurtful. If your intention is to get somebody where they're really vulnerable, those are also the words that will come, if that's our intention. So we have to be very, very careful. but we can use it for the most beautiful connection. So I want to talk about one of the number one things that stands in the way of our intuition, of being able to hear. And it comes back to this definition of intuition and this challenge that Ramanujan had, that the definition of intuition is to perceive directly without reasoning. And in our world, we think reasoning is so smart. We just think that the ability to do mental gymnastics is so smart. And this is coming from someone, I have a mathematics degree. It's not like it's not, I remember going to university, studying mathematics, but I love mathematics from the philosophical side, right? Mathematics is not just arithmetic and stuff. Like, it is literally like seeing patterns in the universe and pondering it and thinking about fractals and cool, like mathematics is a philosophy. Like, it's so much more. But this weird obsession with being able to prove everything or else it doesn't exist, this gets in the way of our infinite potential. It limits us to only that which we've experienced before, we've read in a book by someone we think is interesting, but it completely limits us. So one of my favorite quantum physicists, David Bohm, he was so interesting because not only was he a quantum physicist, he was really intrigued with humanity. To him, the only reason to study physics was, for him, he was raised in a very poor area in the States, and he really wanted to fix the poverty in the world. So everything he did was all about trying to understand the world so that we could heal this poverty issue. So he was very interested in the human psyche and the way we think and the way we perceive the world. And he would even say that, that if we had war and we had all these issues in the world, he said the problem is it isn't about going after the war or the issue. We have to look at the thinking that created it to begin with. That's the key. He says that, and of course he was really good friends with Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti, who was an amazing spiritual teacher, and they were very good friends, and they would have wonderful conversations. If you ever go on YouTube, you can find conversations between David Bohm and Krishnamurti that I wouldn't say they're riveting, but they entertain me to no end because they are both the most kind-hearted men and so respectful of each other. It's just, to listen to them talk, I don't know, it just does something beautiful in my heart. And Krishnamurti would also say that all of our experience begins with our thought. And so David Bohm, he thought a lot about this thinking issue. And so what he would do is he would play with the words, because he said that our language was actually not, it wasn't adequate to really describe what's happening inside of our minds. So he said most of the time when we are thinking, or when we think we're thinking, so this language is going to get hilarious in a moment, when we think we're thinking, we're not. He said we're actually remembering old thoughts and repeating them. So something I read in a book, I'm repeating what I read in that book. I'm repeating something that someone said, but I'm repeating it so much because I'm using my brain to process or to repeat them. I call this thinking, but he would call it thoughting, because you're just repeating a thought. So he actually created a verb, which isn't real for anyone who English isn't your first language. He would call it thoughting. He said what most people consider thinking isn't thinking at all, because they're not actually in this moment. They're not actually thinking in this present moment. They're just repeating thoughts from before. But because it feels like it's happening in our brain, we call it thinking. And this is fascinating, because a lot of this reasoning that we are so addicted to is really just thoughting. It's just repeating the accumulation of facts that we've gathered together over a lifetime. But we're not thinking. We're just regurgitating. So what's interesting about thinking is thinking brings our brain and our intuition together in this moment to ponder something new. Right? Like you actually, if you really think you're thinking, you must be right here, right now. No thoughting, no old thoughts, just right now. See, and this instantly brings me to Einstein, right? Einstein would do what he called thought experiments, where he would, there was something that didn't make any sense, which is basically, that's so funny about science, is that science is based in theory, right? It's like you look out into the world and you don't really understand what you see. So you develop a theory, an idea, and other people go, yeah, that kind of fits. Yeah, I like that. And we call it a theory. Maybe it's the atomic theory. Right now we have this great idea that atoms, we're made up of these atoms, and they seem to be energy, and they seem to be held together by magnetism. And they make up molecules, and it all seems like a really good idea. So right now, as a general population, we are accepting the atomic theory as reality. But one of the things that drives physicists crazy, like David Bohm, Einstein, Niels Bohr, all of these huge thinkers in the world, is that the atomic theory doesn't actually cover everything. It's not actually right. It's the best we've got, but it's not actually right. It doesn't allow for miraculous healings. It doesn't allow for the miracles we see in the world. We call them miracles because we don't understand them. Einstein, it drove him crazy because even the ideas of quantum physics do not line up with his theories of relativity. They don't mix. And yet the theory of relativity we fully accept. The quantum theory we fully accept. But these two worlds do not agree, and they cannot both exist. Which is what brings these amazing scientists to a place where they must do thought experiments. Because all the theories that we have about this world we live in completely contradict each other. And so the scientists are literally like, so where do we go? We go up. We ask for a greater vision. We do experiments in our mind and we say, is it this? What about this? And we mix infinity with this incredible brain and we play. And this is what Einstein used to do. Einstein and David Bohm were friends. They actually lived side by side for a little while. But again, David Bohm's theories of quantum physics did not agree with Albert Einstein. And they would have long conversations about how can these two perspectives exist and seem completely reasonable and rational, and yet completely contradict each other. Can you imagine David Bohm and Einstein sitting in a room going, I don't know if we can ever bring this together. That's so awesome. So this idea of truly thinking in the moment and releasing all of this old thoughting, releasing whatever it is we've learned. And don't get me wrong, you guys know I love telling stories and reading books and learning new things and all that. But we must place all that where it belongs. We must place it in this epic library of our soul that we can pull out books when we need. But it's not thinking and it's not intuition, that we have access to something in this present moment. And when we mix this infinite quantum field, the divine, God's guidance, whatever you want to call it, in with whatever we're pondering and we're looking for answers for, that's where intuition becomes really, really interesting. Right? That's when we sit quietly in meditation and we listen and all the world gets quiet and we're able to connect with that. I don't know. It's like we kind of remember, who we really are. I think one of the things that's interesting about, the big brains admitting that they don't know is that we have this weird idea that we think that we need to know in order to be here. Like that we need to understand it. I get the desire to understand. But what if we actually accomplish greater things here? Like I know for me, when I get caught in my brain and I get caught in all the to-do lists, and don't get me wrong, I'm a list maker. I love lists. But when I get all caught in that physical world, one, I get super tired. And two, there never seems to be enough time in the day. But when I slow down and I listen and I do as I'm guided, everything is done. Everything is completed. It's so much easier. But again, we can't explain it. It's very difficult to explain because it doesn't make sense in the physical world, but we're blending, infinity with the finite. It's sort of when, a lot of these physicists, they would talk about the nature of time and how time changes, that it isn't always these little set pockets of time, that time stretches, almost to the point of living in timelessness some days, What is the best way to connect with your third eye? This may sound like a funny answer, so I'll explain it. But the first step is to want to. And what I mean by that is to actually want information that isn't from the world. To want information that may not agree with the people around you. Because sometimes we say that Carolyn Mace, she once said that, one of the reasons that we can't hear our inner truth, she actually talked about it in terms of dark nights of the soul. Dark nights of the soul are these times when everything you ever thought you knew crashes to the ground and you're sort of left not knowing what to think. And she said, one of the number one reasons people have dark nights of the soul is they've asked for help, they've asked for guidance, and they got the answer, but they didn't like it. That's not the answer they wanted, and so they wait for a second answer. And then they get stuck. They get kind of stuck in their own inner purgatory, and so it's really interesting because sometimes, like, when I was 30, I was part of a program called the Way Down Workshop. It was all about losing weight using spirituality. And it was actually super awesome. It was a super great program. And it worked. But the funniest part of it was, her theory was that when we eat, we're filling two different holes. We're either filling our stomach because we're actually hungry, or we're filling our heart because we're hungry for something else. This was just her theory. And she said, so if you're eating because you're actually genuinely hungry, awesome possum. If you're eating for any other reason at all, she was really, really hilarious. Like, she was really fundamentalist, kind of Baptist. She was so fun. I just got a kick out of her. And she would say, you just get down on your knees and you pray for help to take that hunger away. And what I was so amazed by in the journey was that I didn't want the hunger taken away. I was doing this because I wanted to lose weight. But when push came to shove, I wanted to eat, whether I was hungry or not. And that was a huge part of my journey. Like, it was a huge stepping stone in that journey to realize, okay, some part of me says I want this new solution, but another side of me is like, no, I don't. And that's why if we really want to hear guidance, we have to actually want it. We actually have to be willing to do something really, really different, or to do something that doesn't agree with others. And that, because the thing is, we all have a third eye. It's talking to us all the time. It's not calcified. It's not, we're not disconnected from it. It's right there. The question is, why are we not listening? It's almost like we've got a hand over it going, no, I'm not listening to that, because that's not acceptable. That's going to just cause too much trouble. So it's an interesting question. It's a really good question. Thanks. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you soon.